Most people don't lose because they're stupid. They lose because they learn too slowly. Not slow like lazy. Slow like by the time they understand what's happening, the moment has already passed. You've seen it in business, in social dynamics, in opportunities that disappear before you even realize they mattered. Someone else moves first. Someone else adapts faster. And later, everyone pretends it was obvious. The uncomfortable truth is this: the way you were taught to learn makes you inefficient. You were trained to memorize, repeat, and push harder when things don't stick. That feels productive, but it isn't. Because the brain doesn't work by force. It works by patterns, connections, and automation. And the people who understand that don't look smarter than you. They just process reality faster. This isn't about motivation. It's not about grinding more hours. It's about fixing the way information enters your mind so it stays, connects, and turns into action without effort. Once you understand that, learning stops being exhausting, and you stop falling behind without knowing why. Most people think life is a competition of intelligence. It's not. It's a competition of adaptation. In business, the first person to understand what's changing controls the market. In social dynamics, the first person to read the shift in energy controls the room. In power, the first person to see patterns early sets the rules. History doesn't reward the smartest. It rewards the ones who adjust first. That's why average thinkers beat brilliant ones. Why socially aware people dominate technically skilled ones. Why calm strategists outperform emotional grinders. They're not smarter. They're faster at learning from reality. They don't cling to old models. They update them. And that ability doesn't come from talent. It comes from how the brain is trained to learn. Why you were taught to learn the wrong way. From the moment you entered school, learning was framed as consumption. Sit still, listen, memorize, repeat. This system rewards obedience, not adaptation. It teaches you to recall information, not reshape your thinking. So people grow up believing learning means stuffing more data into their heads. More books, more videos, more notes. But real learning isn't accumulation, it's restructuring. That's why most adults forget what they read within days, can't apply what they understand, feel overwhelmed by complexity. They're trying to use a storage-based system in a pattern-based world. Your brain is not a library. Your brain was never meant to store facts. It's a prediction engine. Every second, it's asking, what matters? What repeats? What can I ignore? What happens next? Learning works when it improves prediction accuracy. That's why memorizing isolated facts fails. There's nothing to predict. But when you understand patterns, prediction becomes automatic. This is why chess masters don't calculate every move. Why negotiators feel leverage shifts. Why experienced people sense danger before it appears. They're not guessing. Their brains are running trained models. Automation is the end goal. Your brain hates effort, not because it's weak, but because effort is expensive. Anything that requires constant conscious attention drains energy. So the brain tries to automate everything it can. Walking became automatic. Reading became automatic. Driving became automatic. Once automated, these actions free mental resources for higher level thinking. The same process applies to persuasion, strategy, pattern recognition, emotional regulation, social awareness, but only if learning is structured correctly. Most people never reach automation. They stop at familiarity. They know something, but they still have to think through it step by step. That's not mastery. Understanding versus integration. This is where most people get trapped. They believe that understanding equals learning. It doesn't. Understanding is conscious. Mastery is unconscious. If you still need effort to apply a skill, it hasn't integrated. That's why people can explain ideas perfectly and fail to use them under pressure. Integration only happens when knowledge is patterned, connected, revisited across contexts. Without that, it stays fragile. Patterns, the compression mechanism. Your brain cannot handle raw complexity, so it compresses. Patterns are compression. Instead of remembering hundreds of tactics, the brain stores a few governing principles. Take persuasion. On the surface, persuasion looks complicated. In reality, almost everything falls under fear of loss, desire for gain, need for validation, status positioning. Once these are internalized, new tactics don't need memorization. They're instantly recognized. This is why experts learn faster over time. Every new piece of information has somewhere to attach. Why random facts never stick. When information has no structure, your brain treats it as noise. Noise gets discarded. That's why reading without framing leads to forgetting. That's why binge learning feels productive but changes nothing. Without patterns, there's nothing to build on. That's why the first rule of accelerated learning is simple. Think in systems, not details. Teaching. The fastest way to integrate knowledge. Teaching forces your brain to answer one brutal question. What actually matters? When you teach, you can't hide behind complexity. You have to simplify. That simplification is what creates recall. Even explaining ideas out loud to yourself forces linear organization, which your brain loves. This is why people who talk through problems solve them faster. Teaching isn't about an audience. It's about forcing structure, connection. Why isolated learning fails. Your brain resists isolated information. Knowledge without context feels meaningless. But when new ideas connect to existing skills, the brain accepts them as upgrades. That's why learning accelerates when strategists learn psychology, athletes learn discipline frameworks, gamers learn real-world tactics. Connection reduces friction. Friction kills retention. The subconscious is not magic. People treat the subconscious like something mystical. It's not. It's simply parallel processing. While your conscious mind focuses on one thing, your subconscious compares patterns, resolves conflicts, integrates information, but it only works on well-framed material. If you flood your brain with unstructured input, the subconscious has nothing to work with. That's why vague learning produces vague results. Sleep is when learning finishes. Sleep isn't rest from learning. It's when learning locks in. During sleep, your brain strengthens relevant connections, weakens irrelevant ones, reorganizes information. This is why reviewing before sleep works. Not because you remember better, but because you signal importance. Without that signal, information is treated as disposable. Questions control the mind. Statements inform the brain. Questions direct it. When you ask, why does this work? Where does it fail? What happens if I reverse it? You activate long-term processing. Your brain hates unanswered questions. Once the loop is opened, it keeps working quietly. This is why curiosity beats discipline. Silence is where integration happens. Constant input prevents integration. If you never pause, your brain never finishes organizing. That's why insights appear during walks, showers, silence, repetitive, low-effort tasks. This isn't coincidence. It's processing time. Exposure. Why single-source learning creates weak knowledge. Learning from one source creates brittle understanding. It works only in that context. Multiple formats force abstraction, extracting the principle independent of presentation. That's what makes knowledge flexible. Flexible knowledge is usable knowledge. Application, the final seal. Your brain doesn't care how interesting something is. It cares whether it changes behavior. Information that isn't used is marked as irrelevant. Application, even mental rehearsal tells the brain, this matters. That's why action accelerates learning more than repetition. The real divide between average and elite. The difference isn't effort, it's feedback speed. Fast learners update models quickly. Slow learners defend old ones. Elite minds don't cling to identity. They adapt. That's why they stay ahead. The system in practice. When learning is structured correctly, effort decreases, speed increases, retention becomes automatic. You stop forcing progress. You start compounding it. Final frame. Most people fight their brain's design. Elite people align with it. They don't force learning. They engineer inevitability. Once learning becomes automatic, everything else accelerates. Decisions, strategy, influence, power, and the gap between you and everyone else grows quietly, permanently. So ask yourself honestly, will you keep learning the way you were taught, or will you finally let your brain do what it was built to do?